Greetings, everyone. We are back with another episode of Let's Go Candid with URJA. You all have been such a wonderful audience to us. Today, we have with us one of the leading entrepreneurs in India, Mr. Arjun Vaidya, who has connected people to our age old culture of Ayurveda over the years. At an incredibly young age of 30, he has done the heads of a founder, an angel investor, a corporate professional, a podcast host, and became the ventures lead at Verlinvest Ventures. He has featured in the Forbes 30 under 30 Asia list and Business World 40 under 40 list and has also been voted as the Amazon Youth SMB of the Year. A very warm welcome to you, sir. It is indeed a pleasure to have you amongst us. Sir, this podcast has two segments. The first segment is of the question answer round. Post that, we'll be having a rapid fire round. So without any further delay, shall we begin with the first segment?
Yes, looking forward. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the very first question for you is that you started out as a corporate professional and then you decided to make a sudden change in your career by becoming the founder of Dr. Vaidya's. When did you realize that you need to change your gears and move towards this Ayurveda legacy? And how difficult was it for you to make this transition?
Look, I think really good question. It's a challenge that a lot of people have when they're starting up, right? So the decision wasn't a very fast one. It had a lot of my life and my background to do with it. I'll tell you where it started, right? It started, look, I think to trace back why I did doctors, you have to go back in my family legacy, right? So Vaidya, my last name means Ayurvedic doctor. I come from a legacy of 150 years of Ayurveda. My grandfather, great-grandfather, and generations before, all Ayurvedic doctors. The legacy of the Dr. Vaidya's business was not a business, actually. It was a clinic. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, they ran a very successful Ayurvedic clinic. My grandfather was a very famous Ayurvedic doctor. He had 350 patients a day coming to his clinic, 12,000 patients on a monthly basis from across India, writing to him via post. But he was a doctor. He didn't care for sales, distribution, marketing, or strategy. So when my father tried to make a business out of what my grandfather had, my grandfather wasn't really interested. And so, I was born with asthma. I grew up with juvenile bronchitis. I grew up with pumps, nebulizers, inhalers, and steroids. I was not allowed to have ice cream or Coca-Cola, Limca, Fanta, Sprite like all the other kids growing up. I love cricket. And I used to play cricket at the Hindu Gymkhana. And by age 7, my grandfather moved me off the cricket field because there was too much dust on the cricket field and it wasn't good for my asthma. So I got into Ayurvedic treatment, and about 13 years of Ayurvedic treatment later, I was cured of asthma. And I believed as a kid growing up that asthma prevented me from doing a lot of things that other kids did. And so when I was cured of asthma at age 15, I started playing cricket again, right? And when I started playing cricket again, I happened to be made the captain of my school cricket team. Not because I was the best player, but because I was the most regular to practice. I was the most sincere, the most disciplined to practice, right? And that was a big moment in my life. It wasn't a great cricket team. There weren't so many people who were interested to be captain, but for me, it meant a lot. Right? It meant a really big deal for me. And from there, I started believing that Ayurveda is more than just family legacy. I have a duty towards this science, right? I'm also super patriotic. So I went to college in 2009. I went to Brown University. I saw a lot of things in the US that I had not seen in India, right? I saw a move towards natural organic products. I saw yoga being repackaged, yoga mats, yoga gyms, yoga apparel, Lululemon, multi-billion-dollar industry in the US. And I thought to myself, why can't we do the same with Ayurveda, right? So I called my grandfather from campus and I said, why is this the case? Like, why aren't Indian companies taking yoga to the world? We have to take Ayurveda to the world. So I came back to India in 2013. I got a job in a private equity fund called L Capital. I spent time on the consumer sector investing, and saw big changes happen in the Indian consumption story, right? So you guys grew up in a different India. I grew up in India, which was obsessed with imported products. I grew up in India where I was gifted a Japanese electronic sharpener for my 11th birthday from a store that only sold imported products. Because at that time, what was considered imported was good and what was considered Indian was substandard, right? And I'm talking about, I was 11 years old in 2002, so a very long time ago. And I saw this big change in India, right? We were investors in a company called Fab India, and I saw Indians happy to consume quintessentially Indian brands, proud of our heritage. I also saw the e-commerce wave come, right? I was the youngest member of the team, and so they said, hey, work on this thing called e-commerce. And 2013, like Myntra, Jabong, Pepperfry, Zivame, all these bluestone companies coming up. And I realized e-commerce was here to stay. Right? It was not just a fad. And then I also saw Ayurveda undergoing a renaissance, right? So government change, Ministry of Ayush was created, hundreds of thousands of customers like you guys became interested in Ayurveda, and Patanjali revolution was happening, right? So this was the macro. On a micro perspective, my grandfather passed. I remembered the promise I had made him. And so I started thinking I'll do something with this legacy. And, it was at the back of my mind, but entrepreneurs always have that one aha moment, that moment which pushes you over the edge, right? And for me, that moment was at my father's 50th birthday in April 2016. His team in his office had a small party for him. And I went to that party, and I was still working in private equity at the time. And I gave a speech at that event. By this time, my grandfather had passed. And after the speech, his nurse of 17 years came up to me and said, you talk about your father's legacy. You gave a great speech, but are you going to let your grandfather's legacy die? And that was the moment where the switch just turned on. And I said, look, I have a responsibility. I have to do this. And so I quit my job. I was 24 and a half years old at the time. So honestly, the exuberance of youth made me believe I'd be extremely successful. Reality was it was tougher than that. But it's not easy to quit a job, right? A job with a reasonably high, stable salary. It was always the back of my mind. But I thought, look, if not now, then when, right? I have no responsibilities right now, and I think I can make this happen. So let's go for it. And that's why I ended up quitting my job and taking on the legacy.
That's literally amazing, sir. It's great to know that you started up new things and eventually succeeded in that. Okay, so we move on to the next question. So, sir, you and your wife, Mrs.Trisha Rajani, have been together since the initial working days of the company. And no doubt you guys started Dr. Vaidya's from scratch, and today you have achieved innumerable milestones. So how did this union as working start, and how she came on board with you?
Look, she wasn't at Dr. Vaidya's when I started. And we were dating much before Dr. Vaidya started as well, right? So we started dating in 2014, so sometime before. Look, both of us were working in the investing world. So she was in the early team at Nykaa, the founding team at Nykaa, and then she worked as an impact investor in Telecap. And all through that time, we both wanted to start something, right? So we'd keep sending articles to each other, this startup, this company, check this out, all of those things. And then eventually I took the plunge. And I started offline with Dr. Vaidya's because October 2016, brands were being built offline, right? And I failed miserably. So I remember it was National Startup Day. So I put a photo from our launch event in October 2016. And we started offline. We signed up 6 distributors. We sold 10 lakhs worth of stock as primary sales. And I thought primary sales means that sales, but didn't realize I built a distributor who would build a retailer, who would build an end customer. And only once the customer would buy would I get paid. So I got 90% of the stock back. And that was a big failure for me. I went to a good school. I went to a good college. I was a good student. And then I had a great job out of college. So I never experienced failure like this. And I reflected on why I failed. And it was because I was young. I had no experience in offline. I was up against players like Dabur, Imami, Patanjali, Zandu, Himalaya. And I had no right to win. Right? And so I remember Trisha telling me mid 2017, hey, I've seen online, you've seen online. Like, why don't you pivot online? No one's doing anything in Ayurveda online. And so I convinced her to join the business. We got engaged and she joined in mid of 2017. And we launched the sort of D2C version of Dr. Vaidya's with drvaidyas.com in November 2017. So that's how the union happened, how she came on board in the business. And I would say from then on, Dr. Vaidya's just went up and up, right? So when we started online, the first year we scaled from 0 to 50 orders a day. We learned online, digital business, how to keep a sort of reasonable CAC. And then from there, the business hyperscaled, right? And then, you know the story. We went from 50 to 5,000 orders a day, got RP Sanjeev Goenka Group on board in our Series A round, scaled to 2 million plus transacting customers across 16,500 pin codes. We launched 80 products. Then eventually we sold the business to them in March of 2021.
Okay. That's amazing, sir. It's good to hear that she supported you throughout and you guys have been together. So great in the business also. So, next question. Sir, we know that you took forward your family's legacy of Ayurveda and developed into a valuable brand. But soon the startup was followed up by an exit. The phenomenon of startup exit is not so common amongst the people. So, how did the people around you respond to it?
Yeah, look, some people were excited, some people were shocked, some people were unhappy. I think startup exits are new in India, right? And so people don't know whether to celebrate them or be sad about them. But I think it's something to celebrate, right? Because as a founder, there is a foregone conclusion or an outcome to a business in a lot of cases, and we've seen this in the West, but we've not seen it in India as much. So I think it was exciting for us. Look, I'll talk about why or the process of the exit because hundreds of people ask that question. I may have been asked this question about 300-400 times now since March of 2021. Only a founder knows what the right time is, and only a founder can decide. Half the people say it was good decision, half the people say it was bad decision. But for Trisha and I, seemed like we had built a really good business. We had sort of reached our goals and reached our objectives, and the offer was fair, and so we took the offer and we exited the business. I would say that only the person in charge or the person taking that decision knows what the right time is, right? And there is no right time. You can never time the market. I think for us, it led to some uncertainty in life as to what we'll do next. But I think we were just happy stepping back and giving back to the ecosystem. And eventually we figure out what we want to do next. But I think an exit is a great time to pause, reflect, and then figure out your next journey. And we are fortunate. My dad said, look, in my life, I've not had this opportunity. I've been running a business for 35, 37 years now. We're really lucky to have this moment to stop and think what's next.
That's great, sir. Okay, so it's the era of startups, as we know that. So would you like to share some of the do's or don'ts that the young minds should follow before starting their own venture?
Absolutely. So I think 3 pieces of advice from me, right? Number 1, startups look really, really exciting on the outside, right? News articles, unicorns, all of those things, but it's a really tough journey. And whoever the founder is, right, that you read about, you don't read about the backstory, the struggles, the failures that led to it. So for all people who are looking to get into this ecosystem, whether as a founder or whether working in the ecosystem, startups are filled with failure. It's a roller coaster, and you have to be able to accept failure with grit and resilience. That's number 1. Number 2, as a young founder, I thought I could do everything on my own, right? The reality is that you can't do anything without a strong, empowered team. You can only work 16 hours a day and you can be efficient for 13, 14, and that's pretty much it. But you can't build a hyperscalable venture alone. So build a strong team from day 1 or from day 10 if you can't start from day 1. And the third one, you can't be partly an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is not a side hustle. It's a full-time role if you want to build something really large. And so you can't be slightly pregnant with entrepreneurship. So you're either in or you're out. If you're in, you got to be 100% in. If you're out, it's okay. But my podcast is my side hustle. I do it over the weekend. It's not my full-time thing, right? And so a hobby is different from a startup.
Yeah, exactly. That's really great information for the people out there who will be watching this. Okay, so in your TED Talk, you told us about how your grandfather wanted you to promise him that you will pursue biotechnology at Brown University. As you pursued economics, a 150-year-old legacy was about to be broken. So did your family approve of your decision, or were they just worried about the legacy being broken?
Look, I'll tell you honestly, my grandfather was not happy at all. So he paid for my first year of college, saying that this guy's going to take on my legacy. After I decided I'm not doing bio or biotechnology, he stopped paying. But my dad was okay. I have a pretty supportive family. My dad's an entrepreneur as well. And look, I think they all believe that you should do what you're good at and what you're passionate about. I wasn't so passionate about going into a lab for 5 hours a week or 7 hours a week. And so I eventually went and studied economics and international relations. So a lot of politics, history, anthropology, sociology, entrepreneurship. That's what I enjoy. And so I went ahead and did that. If you ask my grandfather that time, he wasn't happy, but hey, I don't think it turned out so badly.
So later on, what was his reaction on your success and the brand you made?
He didn't get to see it. He passed before he could see all of it. So
okay, that's sad to know.
He didn't see it.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Do you think Dr. Vaidya has made a difference by striving to connect the mainstream society exclusively to Ayurveda practitioners through developed technology platforms?
Yeah, look, I think Ayurveda didn't have accessibility at the touch of your fingertips, right? And if you ask me what's the proudest achievement of Dr. Vaidya, it's not the awards, it's not the exit, it's not the sales, it's not the products. It's that we reached 16,500 pin codes. From Andaman to Muzaffarnagar, from Mizoram to Trichy, we were able to give hundreds of thousands of even millions of customers access to high quality Ayurvedic products and care at the touch of their fingertips, something they'd never seen before. So that to me is the biggest success of Dr. Vaidya's, and that's what digital businesses should strive for.
That's amazing, sir. Okay, you have an enormous experience working with an equity firm and interacting with a lot of entrepreneurs at an early age in your career. Do you feel that the experience that you gained while working in the corporate world helped you while you were setting up your own venture?
Look, I think it gave me some context, it gave me some discipline, it gave me a lot of exposure and a lot of connections. So I think it helped me a lot specifically. A lot of people ask me, hey, should I work and then start up? For me, it worked, right? It really helped me mature a little bit. Not that it will work for everyone, but for me, it was a great decision. I learned about the Indian consumer landscape. I got to meet some amazing founders. I learned about investing. I learned from founders about building scalable businesses. So for me, it was an exceptional experience.
Great, sir. That's really amazing. Okay. So we see that there's always been a conflict between allopathy and Ayurvedic practitioners debating which is the better way of treatment. What is your stand on this? And do you think that there's any relevance on this debate?
Well, look, I think my grandfather always believed the two can coexist, right? So I'll give you an example. So my grandfather used to say that, look, just imagine a village, right? And there is a river flowing through the village. In the summer, that river is dry, and so people can cross the river because there's no water. But in the monsoon, the river will be filled with water. So there's two ways to cross the river. One way is to swim. The other way is to use a raft, right? And so allopathy is that raft. Ayurveda is the teacher that teaches the villagers to swim so that they can cross the river, right? And so both are required at different points of time in your life. And so if you're suffering from a fever, right, you need to have your allopathic medicine to bring the fever down, and then your Ayurvedic medicine to build the immunity in the long term. But if you're suffering from asthma, which I was, your allopathic medicine can prevent or help you while you're getting an asthma attack. But in the long term, to get rid of the asthma or any chronic ailment, you need Ayurveda. And so he believed the two can coexist, and there's no point being at loggerheads. And value can be built if the two coexist.
Of course, sir, I totally agree to that. So you mentioned earlier that you faced some of the failures during setting up your venture. So would you like to share some of the experiences or instances wherein you failed? But today, when you look back at it now, how can you define that it made you strong?
Look, I think I'll give you the example of starting offline and failing miserably, right? And because of that failure, we reflected. We then, and like while you're going through failure, it's not easy, right? People say celebrate failure, wear it as a badge of pride. I'm a big cricket fan, so I was watching this new documentary on the India-Australia series called Down Underdogs. And the first match, for all of you cricket fans that remember, India was in a decent position in the test match and then got bowled out for 36 runs, the lowest ever score in a test match, right? And Ravi Shastri, the coach, said, wear your failure, wear the 36 as a badge of honor on your sleeve, and let's make things happen. And eventually they won that series. It's not easy while you're going through failure, but that failure is what made us pivot online. That pivot to online made us successful. That pivot to online made Dr. Vaidya what it was. And so thinking back, it's great, right? But in the moment, accepting it and moving on with it, right? That's tough, but I think that's really important. The hallmark of a good entrepreneur.
Okay, that's absolutely inspiring. So this inspired me a lot. And next question for you is that during the COVID times, a lot of pseudoscience practices were being done in the name of Ayurveda. For instance, cow dung could cure COVID. So what are your views on that?
No views. I don't believe in that specific example that you gave. So no views, to be honest.
I agree to that. Thank you sharing for all the valuable information with us, sir. That's it for the first segment. Your answers were really inspiring and insightful. I learned a lot from these and will really apply this into my life also encourage others to do the same. Now, I would like to hand over the space to Simran to continue with the next segment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kashish. Before we start, I would like to say one thing, sir. I heard all your answers to those questions and I found them really valuable and insightful. You're
Thank,
definitely inspiring a lot of people out there. So, thank you so much for that.
thank you. You're very kind.
Should we begin with the rapid fire
Oh,
questions
go ahead.
now? Okay. So, the first question is, what is that one motivational quote or thought that keeps you going?
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
That's a lovely one, sir. Next question. Any habit of yours that you want to get rid of, or any one habit that you would like to inculcate in your daily life?
I'm very bad at time management. Very, very bad. I need to get much
I
better at it.
I absolutely agree with that. Even I want to inculcate this habit. Moving on to the next question. Who has been your idol?
Look, I think my father and grandfather had a big impact on my life. But if I talk about an idol, it would be Sachin. My phone cover, if you can see it, has his jersey number at the back of my phone. And look, I think while Sachin is a great cricketer, if you think about it philosophically, right? Every time Sachin went out to bat in the 90s and early 2000s, and you guys were really young at that time, we didn't have such a good Indian cricket team. And so pretty much all the expectation of billion plus people was on one man's shoulder. And that's what entrepreneurs have to go through. You have a lot of expectation and a lot riding on your work and on your shoulder. And so I relate a lot to him. And look, I was a huge fan and still I'm a huge fan.
Of course, sir. I believe he has inspired all of us. Moving on. What's that one thing you wish you would have known before you began your career?
Look, I think as an entrepreneur, I would say like how much you will fail and how much of a roller coaster it is. I had no clue when I got into the journey.
Okay. Well, now when I start my career, I'll surely keep this in mind. Next question. Any book that you can read multiple times without getting bored?
The Purple Cow by Seth Godin and From Zero to One by Peter Thiel. I think these are really so. Purple Cow is a marketing book and Zero to One is a startup book. And I saw a movie recently called 83 on India winning the 19.
Yes, yes.
I could watch that movie like every day.
Lovely movie, I
Amazing
must
movie,
say.
amazing, superb movie.
So now I'm going to add this book to my reading list. Next question. What is that one skill of yours that you think if you did not have, you would have not made it till here?
Discipline and consistency, keeping on going on.
Very well said, sir. And the final question. If you had to choose an alternate career for yourself, what would it be?
Always wanted to be a sports person, but I was never good enough. So cricketer for sure, but I was never good enough.
Quite unique, I must say. Lastly, do you have any tips for the young minds listening to this podcast who are still on the verge of making it big in their lives?
Look, I think for all of you on the fence with entrepreneurship, there is no better time than now. The Indian startup ecosystem is more vibrant than I've ever seen it. There is so much exciting stuff happening. So yeah, go for it because we are in a special phase of time for the startup ecosystem in India.
Thank you so much, sir. It was wonderful interacting with you. Thank you for sparing your valuable time and giving us such amazing insights and inspiring our audience. It will definitely help young minds like us make informed decisions and grow in life because this conversation has enlightened me for sure. On behalf of the entire team of URJA and the students of Shri Guru Gobind Singh College of Commerce, we are grateful to have the opportunity to interact with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.